Portland, Oregon has a billion-dollar infrastructure crisis that's only going to be further exacerbated by the almost $100 million budget crisis. Got a bunch of crises. We've got a doom loop that continues. Let's get into it. Here we go. In February, Portland's city administrator announced that the city would need to slash jobs and maintenance projects in order to address a $93 million shortfall in the annual budget. There aren't really any good choices here, said City Administrator Michael Jordan at a press briefing. It's about where you will find the money to balance the budget. Isn't that always the issue? Where's it going to come from? Yeah. To balance the general fund gap, Jordan suggests cutting $22 million from the Transportation Bureau's street maintenance and repair programs, slashing $19 million into park services by reducing community center hours, and eliminating summer programs and eliminating nearly 300 jobs across all city bureaus. That is just to get that gap where it needs to be, which is close to zero, right? In the meantime, Portland should be spending about $1.4 billion a year on infrastructure, roads, parking lots, tennis courts. You're going to see an example of that. Anything municipality-wise that needs maintenance that is a physical structure that over time depreciates. It falls apart. City of Portland is literally falling apart as we watch it, infrastructure-wise, and it doesn't have much in the way to be able to rebuild itself. $93 million shortfall isn't nothing, but in the scope of Portland's $8.2 billion annual budgets, still a fairly small percentage, okay? But it turns out that that shortfall is only a fraction of the real problem the city is facing. The city is underinvested in maintenance of its aging infrastructure for years. Portland is literally falling apart. Let's look and see what audit proposes a fix to address Portland's quickly deteriorating infrastructure. The city that works, in quotes, Portland known as, has watched as its maintenance backlog has ballooned and the price tag to keep up with basic repair soars about $1 billion per year. And they're just not doing it. Doing certain aspects of it, but this is an example here of kind of what they're talking about. You got a tennis court, sport court, whatever it is. You'd like to be able to use it, yeah, but little Johnny, he's going to kick his foot right there. He's going to fall down flat in his face, and the city's going to get sued, right, by little Johnny's mom. So they got to close this kind of thing down until they can figure out a way. Okay, how do we get this going again? Broken crosswalk lights, tennis courts split open with uneven asphalt, playground slides covered in rust, fire station roof leaking water, broken sewage pipes, a public restroom with a rodent infestation. I mean, those are all normal things that any big city is going to see, right? But, and Portland is not alone. You are seeing this happen in so many of the big cities where you've got these budgets that a lot of the income for the budgets, the money coming in, is coming from real estate, specifically commercial real estate. And those markets have not done well. That is why you are watching mayors, governors, business leaders, coalitions of business leaders, basically screaming, get everybody back to the office, get people back to the office. And it's a mandate because cities need their revenue to run their downtown. And without all the folks, with big vacancies, without the big companies in your downtown core, not going to happen. Just not going to happen. Years of neglect has left Portland's roads, buildings, parks, facilities, water systems, technology, and other types of infrastructure deteriorating at an unsafe and expensive pace. City owns nearly $75 billion in these types of structures and equipment, and much of it was built over 50 years ago. Like a lot of cities, right? Especially here in the Pacific Northwest. We're not new cities. These are, they've been around for a while, but our downtown cores, they're just not that old, right? Just because, like during the Civil War, Seattle was basically Indian territory, right? Just was. We don't have the history that like a New York City has. According to a city audit released Wednesday, most of the city's infrastructure is near or beyond the end of its useful life. As an appraiser, I got to talk about roof life expectancy, meaning an underwriter sits and looks at my appraisal, and the first picture they're going to see is a picture of the front of the home with maybe a roof that isn't looking so good. It's not necessarily sagging or doing any crazy stuff like that, but the shakes look a little off color. Shingles look a little off color, whatever it might be. Hey, this looks like it's towards the end of its life. And what they'll ask you as the appraiser is, can you tell us if you think this roof is going to go for another 5 years? In the case of Portland, the answer is the infrastructure going to keep going? Well, it's going to keep going, but not in a particularly safe manner for the residents of Portland, because when you got a bunch of stuff breaking, that's not how cities are typically run. It is, unfortunately, how a lot of cities are being run right now, and a lot of that has to do with budgetary concerns. Nobody's got a budget that's doing great. For years, the city has underinvested in routine and preventative maintenance of its aging assets. Since like 2002, I've read these accounts of, well, we need to be spending $150 million here, goes up exponentially 23 years later. Here we are. It won't fail all at once, of course, but in another 15 years, 20% of the city's assets may no longer be usable. A fifth of all of Portland's assets no longer usable, meaning not only streetlights, but roadways, alleys, parking lots, you name it, right? Anything that can fail, and everything physical has a remaining physical life that ends one day. And that's why you have more barns get torn down than ever fall down. They deteriorate, but they can keep going on for a long time in that state of deterioration. Eventually, you just got to take them down because they're a safety deal, right? Or more likely, city assets will just close to residents. That's what you're going to see, because you're not going to have the money moving forward to fix all this craziness. If the city does not start catching up on its backlog, auditors warn the city will face disrupted or discontinued services that could lead to more serious safety, livability, and economic challenges. Again, this is not just Portland. This is a lot of big cities that are facing this budgetary they're in the hole. They're negative. Their budget, they're looking for ways to, what can we cut? And then what taxes can we do to get some more money back up in here in this bad boy? For example, in recent years, several Portland parks and rec assets, including pools, picnic shelters, light poles, trail bridges, and playground equipment, have failed and had to be closed or removed to protect the public. Parks predicts that without new stable funding, 20% of its assets could fail in the next 15 years. There's that number. An anonymous city employee quoted in the audit explained, "We are great at buying shiny new things, but we are not good at maintaining, operating, and renovating the assets we already have." That's not a shocker, is it? Given the city's estimated $93 million budget shortfall, it seems impossible to find more funding for maintaining the public's assets. But without a strategy for closing Portland's infrastructure funding gap, it will continue to grow and put more assets at risk of failure, resulting in less services to Portlanders. It's the doom loop. All right, there's even less here now. Why would I want to move here? We've got fewer cops, because that's one of the things that Portlanders are okay with, is defunding the police. They are more okay with defunding the police than a lot of other things. They'd rather keep funding homelessness than pay their cops. I mean, it's insane the way that goes. But, this is Portland. This is why you've got a lot of the situations that you do, particularly around public safety, is because you've got this whacked out far left liberal mindset that doesn't really transfer to reality as far as running a city safely or even a well-managed city. Portlanders press leaders on crime safety amid budget cuts. So you've got Portland folks that are saying, hey, we need some help in here. And this was an event. Get this. This was an event put on by Future Portland, brought together top officials like Multma County District Attorney Nathan Vasquez and Portland Police Association President Aaron Schmutz. But Bob Day couldn't go because it was looked upon as a political deal, and he just can't get involved. There are so many examples of politics getting in the way of things. So the police chief can't go to a meeting with folks that are discussing public safety because it wouldn't look good. The optics don't look good. Well, the optics of a crazy, shirtless, homeless man running around with a knife, pepper spraying cops, threatening cops for 3 days, that's also not an example of public safety that I think most folks want to live with. But that's the reality in Portland, is that you've got a community that's so afraid of stepping on anybody's toes, so afraid of offending anybody, that they'll literally allow the police force to just let some whacked out crazy nut job on drugs run around and threaten the general citizenry with a knife. Just let him go. It's okay. Let him go. That's a real life example. You see the podcast here. We covered that. It's just, it's mind blowing that that's the deal, but that's the deal. Portland City union workers hold rally outside possible city hall amid possible cuts. So everybody's gunning for what's going to get cut. What are they going to cut? Because you got to do some pretty heavy cuts. Washington State has to do some heavy cuts. And I don't really know what that'll look like. I mean, taxes go up, right? I mean, that's just the general theory is, well, don't have enough money. We got to continue spending because we're a big blue Democrat run state. So is Oregon. Got to keep that spending going. Got to have those programs to, whatever. Just the billions and billions of dollars that are spent on nonsense. So yeah, here's an interesting one. Given the choice, Portlanders would cut police services to balance the budget. Okay. One of the more striking findings I thought was at one point we asked, would you rather reduce police shifts or reduce parks maintenance? And frankly, I expected people would say, given the choice, they would reduce park maintenance. But most people were most okay with cutting funds from the police. This is the mindset that gets you where you are. So you've got a situation where public safety is not happening in Portland, specifically not happening in your downtown core. And that's why you have a vacancy factor as high as it is. That's why you have as many businesses that have already left and they're not coming back because you don't have the foot traffic. You don't have the people just roaming around the downtown core. It's been hollowed out. And when you have fewer police because you have a citizenry that is willing to cut the police budget, yeah, we don't need him. We don't need him. We don't need them. When you've got that attitude where we'd rather have our parks and rec people get that money, or we'd rather have our homeless outreach get that money, then that further continues the doom loop scenario where there's nobody in downtown. And then that income coming from the taxes that, all the stuff that the revenue gets kicked off from the downtown core isn't there. And it just gets worse. And then you don't have the money to pay your infrastructure. Because you got a budget per year for your infrastructure, and you got to keep that up because all of a sudden it's like a car or a home that has a whole bunch of deferred maintenance. All of a sudden it gets to that point where if you don't do it, then it's all going to come at once. All right, we got water, pipes breaking over here. We got super sewer lines backed up over here. Roads all destroyed. Tennis court the kiddies can't play on. The slides all rusted out. You can't have a rusty slide. That's just terrible. Terrible. I haven't heard anybody on council talk about cutting police officers. We know that there are positions to be filled within our police force. I think the question is whether we cut some of the overtime shifts and cut some of the overtime funding. Well, that's the only way that Portland Police is basically covering public safety right now is overtime funding because you only have so many cops You don't have enough to basically go around. So what do? You just work their asses off. That's literally what so many police departments are doing across the United States right now. And so, what incentive does somebody looking at policing as a career, what incentive do they have? All right, I'm going to come in, might get killed, probably get sued, might lose my job for doing my job, but I should become a cop anyway? Is that what we're saying? And that's what we're saying, throughout a lot of these big cities. Hey, we really want you to help us out with our public safety and become a police officer. Most folks are like, I don't think so. That just doesn't seem like a good idea, given the way that you've vilified policing. And this is one of those examples. Yeah, we're going to cut the budget for your department, and you're going to get laid off because the people at Parks and Rec, they need a guy to, they need a new arborist. So yeah, sorry, Precinct 3 or whatever, downtown precinct. You guys, you're just going to have to work some more overtime. Literally what they're doing. If Portlanders in this survey had to put key services in the chopping block, in second place would be housing and homeless services. In third, parks and recs. Police number 1, housing and homelessness second, parks and rec third. In that order, cops first, homeless, parks and rec. Should be the other way around, right? I mean, it really should. But that's kind of the mentality you've got going on here, where you've got people that just have these really, really misguided ideologies and don't really understand business, nor do they really care to understand business, because they just think money grows on trees and we're just going to go in the backyard and pluck some off and, just run with it. We're just going to go with it. Portland's going to be great. Keep Portland weird, right? Keep Portland weird. I had a lot of stories coming out of Portland lately. Just all kinds of stuff going on. Portland's budget woes crystallize as top administrator outlines the $93 million deficit. So it's not a huge deficit, and it's not as big as I thought it would be. But it's enough where you gotta already, before the new term comes, you've got to figure out a way to whack some services or increase the taxes. And Portland is one of the most overtaxed cities out there. I was looking at Portland and Oregon. The taxation in Portland is off the hook. I mean, it's like, wow, you guys are really getting taxed. I mean, 10 ways from Sunday. So throwing in yet another layer of taxation. I mean, that's what Washington State's facing. We're going to get just a bunch more taxes because we're in a big blue Democrat-run city, and tax and spend is the thing, right? There's none of this really cutting budgets and holding ourselves accountable and maybe cutting some spending. It's tax, spend, tax, spend, tax, spend. And Washington State, legislators have done a fabulous job of spending to the point where we've got, I think, a $16 billion deficit. I mean, it's 13 billion, something like that, those numbers. I mean, what's a few billion amongst friends, right? What's a few billion? Who's really keeping score? So will this become a real problem? It's already a real problem if you haven't been keeping up on your infrastructure. I mean, when a business has that happen, eventually they get liquefied. They get sold and liquefied. If you're not keeping up on your infrastructure, if your machinery, if your plant isn't having regular investments, and even when you go to buy a non-owner occupied piece of real estate, 1 to 4 family units, not like Letitia James, who buys a 5-plex and calls it a 4-plex, because that's illegal and there's a bunch of fraud involved there. And I hope she goes to jail. I hope she has endless cavity searches, because that's what that woman deserves. You know what I mean? She's terrible. She's awful, and she gets whatever she deserves on that one. But when you go to buy a 1 to 4 family property and you're buying it non-owner occupied, on one of the forms, the basically rental income statement form, operating income statement, which is going to change. All the forms in appraisal are going to change. But you've got a form that outlines, okay, this is how much money out of the monthly income you're getting as rent needs to be identified towards the roof, towards general maintenance. Hey, it's going to need a paint job, all that good stuff. Because the lender, after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, if you default, the lender doesn't want to take back a property that's an absolute train wreck. That's not the game that they're in. So they want to make sure when you buy this property that you're going to be able to do the maintenance. And if you don't, then it gets foreclosed on. It can get foreclosed on, those situations. But when you've got an entire city that's not paying it, the city just deteriorates. Detroit, good example of that. You had, entire auto industry pull out. And they're saying the same thing about Los Angeles right now. Will Los Angeles be the next Detroit? Because so many in the film industry are now taking their business elsewhere because California has gotten so expensive and they're shooting films all over the world instead of Hollywood. It's wild. Just did a podcast on that. Does the doom loop continue? I think the doom loop is continuing in Portland. Is the doom loop easing up in San Francisco? I think the doom loop is easing up there. And some of the numbers that I base that on are I'm watching what the pricing is per unit for stuff in downtown San Francisco per square foot, along with the current sales happening. What you've got is a bunch of the big commercial players that have hung on. Seattle, good example. One of the most prominent real estate developers just gave back 2 buildings because they've held on for this long. It's been, a number of years now since 2022 when interest rates went up and it became more difficult to refinance. Long story short is you're still seeing the transfer of these buildings, but now it's at a point where that pricing, I believe, is starting to even out in San Francisco, where it's not evening out in Seattle. It's more evening out in Seattle than it is in Portland. But San Francisco, you are starting to see some investment come back in. And a lot of that to me is because of the AI industry. You've gone from, essentially straight software to now you've got the AI industry, and we're starting to see businesses take some pretty significant commercial spaces down in San Francisco. You are not seeing that in Portland. So without the influx of new blood, meaning new businesses, the big businesses that occupy the high rises, they have their employees go down to the ground street level and get a taco, get a whatever, do my shopping at the local grocery store, that kind of thing. And then, they go home and they've spent a bunch of money in the downtown core, and that creates the income for all these bills that the city needs to run them. But if you don't have that income coming in because your downtown has just been cut at its throat because you had tear gas Teddy, doing the bro hug with a bunch of soccer moms along with Antifa in downtown as they try and light the federal buildings on fire. Yeah, that doesn't do a lot for confidence of big employers wanting to take down a whole bunch of commercial space in downtown Portland. Who would have thought, right? So yes, doom loop continues in Portland, and I think it's going to continue for a while. And I don't know what's going to turn it around. Time? I would say that, but unless you've got the investment going on, and Portland doesn't have the ability to do that, it's going to take a super strong leader. And you know what? It's probably going to have an R by their name, and there's no way in hell Portland is electing a Republican for anything, right? It's just not done. Because, Republicans are bad. They're terrible people. And yet Republican-run cities are the cities that don't have this necessarily going on right now. They just don't. Just don't. It's not a thing. Let's spend a bunch of money on ridiculous nonsense and not fix our roads. This will work out great, right? What could go wrong? Well, we are watching it go wrong in real time. It's wild. I was watching a quick video. Check this out. Portland.
Stairs into the mall. And this is what is here. I wish you would smell it. It smells like pee.
Pass. Oh, good. Good.
So this is the only way to get upstairs if you're parked right here to get to Lloyd Center.
Big shopping mall. Check this out. Just, some pants. Yeah. I mean, why not? Leave your pants behind. Optional.
This is good. Wait on the way.
Is that true?
And right there is Barnes & Noble. So again,
Pop out at Barnes & Noble.
garage, Barnes & Noble, Lloyd Center. This is where you have to go.
Doesn't exactly scream, hey, come shopping at the Lloyd Center. And the reason I brought that little clip up, that's the shopping mall I used to go to with my grandmother. I would be driving down from Bellevue, or I'd take the train down from Bellevue with my brother, go see my grandma in Longview, Washington. And because Longview isn't a super big town, we would go to the big town, which is Portland, and we would go to Lloyd Center. I think it had did it have a Frederick and Nelson, or maybe the Bonn way back in the day? Something like that. Some store that my grandma liked to go to. And we would get some of our summer clothes at the Lloyd Center shopping mall. I vividly remember that. This would have been back in the 1970s, maybe early 1980s, something like that, before I could drive. I think I started driving in like 85. So, along those lines. So this is one of those indicators of this isn't going in the right direction. Things are not going in the right direction. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. Catch up with me in the next one. Bye for now.